All right, well, welcome everybody to the Marriott Marquis here in Washington and to our virtual attendees. Thank you for joining. This is a really exciting day for all of us. This is the first time we're getting back together in person here at the ABA tax section. I know a lot of us are really excited about that. So my name is Tom Greenaway. I'm the vice chair for CLE for the ABA tax section, and I'm a principal at KPMG in Boston. I'm really excited for this program, and I'll introduce our first two panelists here in a moment. But before we begin, let me just introduce what this program is and what it's designed to do, and encourage everybody who's part of our audience here today, live and online, to help out with the development of this program. So the ABA tax section puts on a wide range of continuing legal education throughout the year. And these past 2 years have been a challenge for us, as they've been a challenge for everyone. We've gone we were in a fully virtual environment for the past 2 years, and we're now re-entering into a hybrid environment, which is going to be a new challenge for us as well. But substantively, one thing that I think all of us have missed the most about the past 2 years as in our professional lives are those interactions that we have, those sort of casual and surprising sometimes interactions that we have with our colleagues and others we bump into. There's something wonderful about that serendipity that happens when we meet somebody in the hall, or when we meet somebody on the street, or when we meet over drinks. And what we want to do with this series is to try to rekindle, again, in a live and a hybrid environment, some of those conversations. And so when we pulled this panel together, we looked around the tax section and thought about some of the most dynamic members that we have in the tax section, and the people who are the most energized about sharing their experience and their journeys. Because for me, I've been with the tax section since 2002, so I've been involved with the tax section for 20 years. And as a law student, I was captivated by some of those more senior members of the bar who really looked like they knew what they were doing, and they were driven, and they had succeeded, and that's what the tax section has done for me over all these years, and I want to pay that forward if we could in this series. So we're starting with 3 different segments here today, but this will be a continuing series. So if there's anyone that you think deserves the spotlight to have that conversation, whether it's with in groups of 2 or 3 or even on their own, we want to make sure we can bring that, those models out to a broader audience. So I can't think of a better way to kick off this series than with the pair in front of us. These two are as thick as thieves and have been for a long time, but as well as being wonderful friends with one another through the tax section and through their professional careers, they're both very distinguished tax professionals. So they're going to lead us in a conversation about what it's like to have a career in tax controversy. And let me introduce first Scott Michael. And Scott is a partner at Caplin and Drysdale here in Washington, D.C., and he is also the nominee to be chair-elect of the tax section, so one of our future leaders here of the section. Joining Scott is Caroline Ciraolo, and Caroline is an absolute dynamo. Caroline does everything, as far as I can tell, and she is also a partner at Kostelanetz and Fink, and she's also an officer here in the tax section. She is the vice chair of our membership, diversity, and inclusion efforts. So without any further ado, I'd like to turn over the panel to Scott and Caroline.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Tom, thank you for those kind introductions. On behalf of Scott and myself, we are so thrilled to be here in person. This is a long time coming. And I wore heels. This has been a long time coming too. So we're going to talk today about becoming and being, I was trying to think of a more clever way to say that, a tax controversy practitioner. We love this practice area. It is super exciting. Every day it brings something new. our colleagues in the tax section love it as well, and so hopefully we will recruit some new people into controversy today. But we also welcome questions. I don't know how that's going to work, but if anybody has any questions in the room, just raise your hand and interrupt us.
We'll repeat them, I think, too.
And we will repeat them, yes. And if there's somebody online, my phone is off, so you can't call me, but if you can somehow text somebody. Okay. So Scott put together a fact pattern, which is awesome, and I'll kick us off and then toss it to you. Okay. All right. So meet Rory. Rory just graduated from law school. She had a few career options, including government and private practice in a law or accounting firm. She decided to join a law firm, yay, law firms, that had many practice areas, including tax and tax controversy. She took a couple of tax classes in law school, but has not yet committed to a practice area yet.
I will say that the idea for this came because so many effective panels, I think, in the tax section start with hypotheticals. And so we were like, well let's do a career hypothetical. Why not? So,
It's a good one. Yeah. A few days after she begins at the firm, she has a hybrid lunch. As we all know, there's all sorts of hybrid lunches these days with two senior associates who tell her that they are working on an interesting tax case involving a tax audit of a high net worth client of the firm. This sounds like every Caplin client.
Right.
Right. Who has invested in some tax shelters called conservation easements. She is intrigued. What triggers one interest in this area? This is where we talk to ourselves. We talk about how we got into this trade.
Right. We should have edited that one
Yeah,
out.
sorry about that.
Right.
So, Scott?
You want me to go first?
Yes.
So I took one tax class in law school. I took basic income tax. And I developed an interest in sort of white-collar criminal defense and litigation. And just by pure serendipity, found Caplin and Drysdale, which at the time was interested in bulking up its white-collar defense and litigation practice. And I met a guy there. His name was Kono Namorato. And he had been in the tax division of the Department of Justice. He'd been the Deputy Assistant Attorney General. And within about a week or two of being at the firm, it seemed like the stuff he was doing was interesting. And so I uninvited, I just went into his office and I said, I would like to work on the stuff that you do. He said, okay, thanks for letting me know. And within about a week, maybe shorter, I was on a plane to Miami. We were in trial in a criminal tax case representing an individual who was accused of over-reporting his income, a false statement on a tax return, which is a felony under 72061. He was, shall we say, sort of a Tier C level member, perhaps, of an organized criminal group. He had a vowel at the end of his last name, not that that mattered. And he was over-reporting his income on his tax return because he had a very high lifestyle that he had to make consistent with his tax returns. This is sort of a theory of organized crime-type prosecutions. And so I said, okay, this is pretty cool. We had a good time. And then within like 2 weeks after that, we were representing, in a very high-profile criminal tax case, Reverend Sun Myung Moon, who was the head of the Unification Church. And he was under investigation and then later indicted for tax fraud in New York. And I was bit by the bug. I had one tax class. And then once those cases were over, to show you how dumb I was, I figured out Caplin and Drysdale actually was a tax firm. I had not really understood that before. And so I was able to meld those interests into this practice.
I don't know how I follow that because at some point I hope you're going to talk about the nightclub that you represented.
That was the Studio 54 case?
Yes,
that was
yes.
just before my time.
Right. Okay, so how did I get into this trade? So I like code-driven law. I like rules. I like to be able to follow the subway map that we'll show you later. And so that type of law, more than con law, even though I'm looking at Jay Calhoun, who practices in state and local tax and lives constitutional law. I've been sucked into that area more often. But I like code-driven law. And so when I went to law school back in the day, tax was required. And I think it's a lost art. A lot of law schools have stopped requiring intro federal tax. But it was required. I took it. I loved it. I then took every tax course I could get my hands on. I ended up, after law school, getting a clerkship with the U.S. Tax Court, and then decided, okay, well, this is tax. To me, controversy was tax. I didn't really think about the other side of tax. And I started looking for jobs. This was my clerkship was from 94 to 96. So I started looking for jobs in like 94, 95, and anyone who was around back then will remember that the job market was not great in the early 90s. And I was applying all over, and all of all the fellow clerks were, we would post all the rejection letters all over our walls. It became like this comic relief. But I was living in Baltimore at the time because I went to law school in Baltimore. I took the MARC train to work every day for the clerkship. And I applied to a boutique firm in Baltimore and got an interview, got an offer, not really knowing any of the players, right? And that interview resulted in me working with my mentor for my entire career. Her name is Paula Younghands. She is... I always say the best, but I think Scott's also
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
She is amazing.
Fantastic.
She's fantastic, and she is a leader she has been chair of civil and criminal tax penalties in the tax section. She is a leader. She was head of the tax division. She's just been fantastic. But I got to work with her as a young lawyer, and that was it. That was the beginning of controversy for me, and I have never left.
These last 2 bullet points is credit to one of the senior partners at our firm, David Rosenblum, who has a standard speech for people who are unsure whether they would be interested in tax generally. And he says, first of all, we're not really a tax firm, whatever that means. Secondly, tax really isn't tax. It's not really what you think it is. A lot of people think tax is numbers and tax return preparation, and not to cast aspersions on that part of the tax world, but tax law is not typically that. And then his last comment is, don't worry, you'll love it.
Right.
And that's exactly, I think, the attitude that people who get into this and like it, I think that's what they would tell you.
I think that's right. Okay. So for Rory, she likes the combination of an interesting client and what sounds like a high-stakes problem. She's contemplating going into the lawyer in charge of the matter to express her interest in working on it and maybe working on similar matters. What factors should Rory be considering before she walks into that office? She's going to go see Kono. What should she do?
Well, we have a lot of law students here, and I think probably online, and I would say there's an adage that you hear about in college and law school, which is take the teacher, not the class. There are professors who are just really good classroom teachers, and finding them is oftentimes the ticket to a more enjoyable educational experience. I would say the same thing is true in law firms. Look for the person who looks like you would learn a lot from, looks like they would welcome you into their group and their practice. Looks like you can make an assessment of people. Is this person likely to be someone who has, mentoring skills? Can they communicate? Are they fun to be with? Are they energetic about what they do? And I think that's look, it's asking a lot of a 25 or 26-year-old if you're coming right out of school to start making those judgments. But that's a place I would start.
I agree, and look to see who's practicing with that. I assume that's probably a partner or a senior attorney, but look to see who your colleagues are, because these cases, particularly these days, are large and they require a lot of collaboration within the firm, and oftentimes the work will be delegated down to a group of attorneys and administrative professionals and paralegals, and you'll be sitting in a conference room, maybe virtually, but you'll be working closely with your colleagues. So look to see who the younger folks are in that practice as well. And try and get a good feel for the demand in the area. I mean, these are busy practices, I think, across the country. Controversy lawyers are extremely busy these days. So it's not a practice that you want to go in and say, at 4 o'clock, I'm signing off, but just keep it in mind before you walk in the room.
Yeah, I would say, though, that tax controversy, I think, compared to other forms of litigation, can be way more civilized. I once had a partner, Dick Timby, tell me that an emergency in a civil tax matter was when you've gotten your second 90-day extension from a revenue agent, and he says that's the last one you're going to get, and you know you can get one more. Tax cases in the controversy realm tend not, I think, to be as all-encompassing as a major piece of commercial litigation, for example. I think there's a little bit of more of a patina of civilized practice in the tax controversy field.
I agree. I find the most rewarding area, which can be a little bit more stressful, as you know from your experience, is the criminal tax space, because there are high stakes. You may be representing an entity, but you may also be representing an individual that when they wake up, this is the case they think about. When they're having lunch, when they're eating dinner, when they're traveling, when they're on vacation, they're thinking about this case, and they want you thinking about it too. And so that can be a bit of high stress.
The other point on this slide about is starting to specialize. None of us control the substance of the cases that come into our office. I mean, look, every law firm says we should be doing more of this kind of work and we should be doing more of that kind of work. And there's certain things you can do, I think, to try to gently steer in that direction. But the fact of the matter is, if you're a tax controversy lawyer, your life and your docket is going to be determined largely by what the priorities of the IRS are at the time and the Department of Justice. 10 years ago, nobody really heard of conservation easements in the same way that they hear now. And now it's sort of the flavor of the year. It's a major focus of a lot of tax controversy practices. So I think for a younger attorney getting into an area that's hot, the recognition of sort of making yourself indispensable, like, yes, I am the person who researched this question in these two other cases. I'm developing an expertise on the valuation issues and how those play out under the regs, on the technical requirements and those how those play out under the regs. That's something to think about. It's not just I'll do this project and then I'll do another project. I always encourage younger lawyers to sort of embrace the projects they get as something that they can become an expert in.
That's so true. And oftentimes, even the mundane is such a valuable opportunity to hone your skills. So, I'll talk to folks about going to work for DOJ and say, like, the bread and butter, if you are a civil trial attorney at DOJ, is like suing to reduce a lien to judgment, right? Or now even FBAR litigation might be viewed as bread and butter. But every case that crosses your desk is important. Every case is there for a reason. And whether it's super exciting because it's the flavor of the month, or whether it's more mundane, maybe it's just an audit or just an administrative appeal trying to seek a penalty abatement, put your best effort into it. It's so important. And get to know your colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Take every case as an opportunity to grow as a person and as a lawyer. Okay, I'm getting onto my little... Okay. Rory gets a research assignment in connection with the case, and she enjoys the project, of course. She likes interacting with her colleagues and decides to let them know that she would like to become a member of the tax group working on controversy matters. How can Rory make this happen?
So this is a long list of thoughts that Caroline and I both had about somebody at this stage of their career and things that they could do to sort of get more involved. A couple of them sort of sing out to me. The second two there, imagining your first project as a test. Unfortunately, senior lawyers can be judgmental and tough, and they're going to make a judgment. First impressions are really important. When associates get evaluated, you try to avoid coming to a conclusion about somebody in 3 or 4 months. But the fact of the matter is, first impressions make an impression. And so the early assignments are particularly important to really focus on and produce quality work. And then another thing I would point out here is the fourth bullet point about interacting with more senior lawyers. I think for somebody starting out in an area, my door is always open. I think, sure, your door is always open. We embrace people coming in to ask us questions and kick around ideas. But if a young lawyer is going into a senior lawyer's office to talk about where they are in an assignment, please come tell me tomorrow afternoon if you are going to be in the office, or if we can get on a Zoom, where you are in this assignment that I asked you to look at a week ago. that's something that requires preparation. And preparing a brief and an outline and treating it almost like an appellate argument and anticipating the types of questions that might come up. And then going into the partner's office or the senior lawyer's office and making the presentation. It's not necessarily as informal as it looks. And I would say don't be deceived by an avuncular, friendly senior person who just wants to chat with you about where you are in the research. That's something to prepare for.
That is so true. And often in controversy, you have personalities that are larger than life. You know, we joke around a lot. Our laughs are guffaws. You know, we find things hysterical that other people, that we have dark senses of humor because we deal in criminal tax. I mean, but that is all part of the personalities in controversy. But the work matters. The work is important. Don't take that kind of friendly, avuncular approach to think that we're not putting 1,000% into every document that goes out the door. That, you know, I'm not sitting, if I'm working on a brief, I may be joking around with you in the morning, but I'm looking at that brief 9 ways to Sunday, and I'm trying to find that missing comma before I have to send it to the printer or file it. And the minute I find a typo, I'm up at night thinking, how did that get overlooked? Like, you have to understand, like, as serious as we are with the fun, that's how serious we are with the work. The other thing is, a young lawyer, in this day and age, everybody's like texting and messaging and Skyping and all those bubbling on their phones and all that. But when you give work product to a partner, not in an email, not in a long email where it's paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs in email, like here's, you know, kind of shooting from the hip. We want memos because we want to be able to go in and edit the memo. We want to give you comments. We want to put it in the file. We may want to edit it and flip it to the client. So understand that there's a time and a place for joking around, and there's a lot of it in controversy. We have a lot of fun, but we work really hard, and that work product has to be top notch.
Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit before, too, this notion of keeping up with recent developments. And sort of getting engaged with the tax world. I'm going to tell a non-tax story here. My brother, Hayes, is an entertainment lawyer in Los Angeles. He went to UCLA Law School and went into entertainment law. And, of course, everybody in California wants to be an entertainment lawyer. And so he would be interviewing people who would come in and say, I really want to be an entertainment lawyer. And he had a little bit of a test. He would say to them, that's great. So I'm just curious as to your interest in the field. What did you think of the opening tracking shot in The Godfather at the wedding when the camera sort of follows you in like you're coming into the wedding and you're going to be a participant in this ceremony? Or what did you think about the way that time was manipulated in Pulp Fiction? It was such an unusual thing that Tarantino did there. And if the applicant would look at him and go, I don't know what you're talking about, then he wasn't interested. He wanted people who were engaged in that world. And I think I would say the same thing about tax controversy. This hypothetical is based on conservation easements. So I would hope that Rory would have spent some time researching what's been going on in the world of conservation easements. Mm-hmm. There's a criminal investigation out there. Really, what's that all about? There was some indictments the other day. What did those indictments say? Getting involved substantively and showing and being enthusiastic for that, I think, is an important part of kind of making yourself indispensable in this practice.
So true. So true. Okay.
Maybe the last point here, too?
Yeah.
Because we all did that.
Oh, my goodness. So oftentimes in controversy practice, the senior attorneys are not only handling 100 cases, you know, and delegating to everyone in the firm, they're also doing a lot of non-billable work. Hi, Heather. And so it's important as a younger lawyer to kind of step back and say, how can I help with that, right? You're doing a panel, I'd love to work on those materials with you. You're doing an article, I'd love to pitch in. So recently, quick example, my firm offered, we actually were thrilled, to be counsel of record for an amicus brief for the American College of Tax Counsel, pro bono activity. Myself and two of my partners worked on it.
It was a brilliant brief. Brilliant.
Thank you. It was a team effort across the board, and we have a young associate who, when we were coming down to brass tacks and we sent her out the first draft, and the college is like, okay, we want to turn this upside down, put it all on the table, and spin it around and do something different. And we're like, thank gosh, we appreciate the feedback. So we went back, and I pulled in a young associate, pro bono, right? Boy, did he jump into that brief. And he loves the FRA. He had already dug into it. But he, around the clock, until it was filed, up to the last moment, we put his name on the brief. So his name, now he has one of those little books. But there are opportunities to jump in and help. Now, I'm not saying you'll always be filing in the Supreme Court, but there will be opportunities, and they will pay off dividends down the road.
I will say that that about 6 months into my practice, my mentor, Kono, asked me to prepare sort of an omnibus outline about aimed at criminal tax defense lawyers on sort of what we do, how to represent people in criminal tax cases. And that outline has now probably had 50 names put on it over the past 40 years. And there, I go to a program, and I will see an outline on representing people in criminal tax investigations, and there are big chunks of it that will be from my outline. It's okay. I'm not looking for the credit. I just think it's amazing that the work product that I did 40 years ago, people still look at it and use it. It's something that you never know when you get an assignment like that it might just last.
Actually, you have two of those, at least two, if not more. But one of those, Scott has this offshore enforcement outline that for about 10 years we all look to. And he would update it. This is why you go to the ABA. He would update it and present it at the Civil and Criminal Tax Penalties Committee meetings and offer his thought leadership. And boy, that was a ticket. You could sell that thing on the corner. So.
Somebody told me we should make a movie out of it.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Meanwhile, in the Eastman case, Rory is starting to engage not just with professionals in her own firm, but professionals from other firms. She's attending common interest meetings, interviewing represented witnesses, and interacting with the IRS. This is such an important part of professional development. So, what are the benefits here?
Well, this was, at least for me personally, and I think for people I've seen develop in their careers, really important. And it was a great privilege, actually, to become co-counsel with other firms, or in a criminal case involving a corporation when you represent the company and there are other firms that represent employees, or vice versa. Or the common interest concept, where lawyers representing different constituencies, and we did this in the foreign account area all the time. Some people were representing, a taxpayer. Some were representing the accountants. Some were representing the lawyers who had advised. And you get together and you have these common interest meetings, and it's just remarkable how much you can learn from people outside your own firm. And it's just, the notion is not to close eyes to that, because that can be such a huge part of development and of getting to know people in the business.
That's so true. And those meetings, I look back on those meetings that started in like 2009, right? People who would come to the meetings prepared, because these were kind of gatherings, and a lot of people would come and just sit and listen, and that was fine. Other people would come with an outline, like, I want to talk about these things. And those people really were elevated in the groups, because everyone around the room was like, that's a smart lawyer. That's a really good point. Boy, that's a good, and then they would find them in the hallways. Speaking of Tom and those hallways conversations, you'd find each other in the hallways and say, can I follow up with you on that? It led to business development. It led to great ideas in your own cases. And it was just really fantastic. Yeah. The other thing I would say is some of my closest friendships are because you brought people into the fold.
Or vice versa.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, just of attorneys, so fantastic.
Well, we stand in the shoes of people who did that for us.
Oh, my goodness. Yes, exactly. At some point we have to talk about opening the circle. I think we're here, actually.
Yes.
Meeting.
Here's the pitch.
Yes. Years later, a couple years passed, and Rory is fully engaged in the tax controversy practice at the firm. We have sucked her in. She hears that one of her colleagues is attending a meeting at the ABA tax section. What? There's a meeting coming up, Scott? Rory contemplates asking the firm if she can attend. Should Rory go to the meeting? Yes! And as you can see, we are now registering folks for the May meeting, which is going to be hybrid, thank goodness, in person. So, of course, you go to these meetings, right? Go ahead.
Yes, and here's a long list of reasons why. I mean, I think we would both tell you, and friends of ours would tell you, that participation in the tax section has been just such a hugely important part of our professional development, the development of our personal friendships, our ability to market and network with colleagues. I mean, it's just been invaluable. I mean, I've been going to tax section meetings for 40 years. First one I went to was at the Mayflower Hotel. It was the May meeting at the Mayflower Hotel, and the Civil and Criminal Tax, and we were in a room like this. And the Civil and Criminal Tax Penalties Committee was about 12 people sitting around a big round table. And our office happened to be just across the street in Kono, and Dick Timby said, "Come with us." And I went over there, and that was my first tax section meeting. And I look back on that as one of the pivotal moments in my career.
My first meeting was, everyone I'm sure has heard of the Vegas meeting, which has now taken on a life of its own in December, right? Well, that, for those of you who didn't know, that didn't used to be in Vegas. It used to be at the Watergate in Washington. It was run by a brilliant tax attorney who passed away far too young, Jerry Pfeffer, and his colleagues. Scott was involved, Kona was involved. They were all, it was just the legends in the tax bar. But it used to be at the Watergate, and then they would split it between the Watergate in, I think it was early fall, and San Francisco around November, December. And then eventually it ended up in Vegas. But that was my first meeting. And I remember going to that meeting thinking, I'm sitting in a panel and I don't understand what they're talking about. These people are all talking about their cases. I don't know if I'll ever get a case because this was right when I joined the firm. And I don't know how I'm ever going to be part of this group. But I kept going. Do not take that first meeting and think, I don't know anyone, I'm not going back. One, find a circle. It will open up for you. Definitely go.
Find one of us. If you're having a hard, we'll connect you with.
Absolutely, yeah. Anyone walking up to anyone and saying, "I'm new. This is my first meeting. Can you show me around?" Or, and we are so excited about being back in person. We're going to be like all over you guys. So, like, please come to these meetings. But you stick with it, and they just become so critical. And not look. I know this is an ABA program. I know you're going to be the chair of the, but let me give a shout out to other organizations as well. This is where you will find your people. You will find the people that do what you do. You will find the people that you can call, phone a friend, the lifeline. This is where you find them, at these organizations. And you'll build lifelong friendships. And you'll be able to pay it forward. We're always looking for the opportunity to pay it forward because so many people do much for us. This is where you can do that. So
the last point here is not to ignore other organizations, which Caroline just mentioned, like the DC Bar, for example. If you practice in Washington, has a vibrant tax set of tax committees. IFA, the International Fiscal Association, if you're interested in international tax at all, it's just an incredible organization. I mean, I went to my first IFA global meeting in 2010 to talk about the then sort of brand new IRS Department of Justice enforcement on taxpayers who fail to report foreign bank accounts and fail to report foreign assets. Leveraging is, I think, a good theme for marketing. If you learn something and do it in one area, figure out ways you can leverage it into other areas. Yeah. And so I went there and I was like, I'm going to do some marketing and talking here about this. And what was funny is IFA at the time was a pretty staid, conservative, business tax-oriented group of international tax lawyers from all over the world. And 3 or 4 people came up to me in the 2010 meeting and said, you know, what you're talking about is really interesting, but I don't really think it has a place here at IFA. This is not the kind of stuff we do. And within 2 years, I had gone to the next one and the next one. It's all they were talking about. It's all they were talking about because it had become global, this notion of enforcing against high net worth people who are hiding money from their respective tax authorities. So you never know. It's helpful to participate in these other organizations as well. Tom?
Scott, this may be a good time for me time for me to interject a question from the audience.
Oh, yeah.
And from our virtual audience, and certainly encourage those of you here in person to come up to the mic or online to send through the questions. But the question is, how has technology changed for you over the course of your practice? And I stepped up to the mic, of course, when you're talking about international high net worth audit. So not just your legal technology, but the technology that tax administrators are using, and then you in your practices, of course, have to engage with.
You want to go first?
So, yeah, I'm one of those people that used to call text messages bubbles, and I would say, don't send me bubbles. Send me an email because I don't know how to respond, and my thumbs are too big, and I don't like holding my phone and all that. So, technology has changed the way we do work. I mean, it has sped it up. We can do more in a day than we used to be able to now with electronic filing and PDFs, and I can merge PDFs now. I can find the little pictures for slide decks. I mean, it has really turned the practice on its head in a good way, but it also means that the expectations are higher. The clients, controversy is a practice. I love it, but it's for the clients, it's always a head wound, right? I mean, it's always urgent because this isn't something that they wake up on January 1st and say, let me budget for this controversy that I'm going to face this year. I mean, and so with the immediate emails and PDFs and e-filing and Zoom and everything, they want you there present 24/7. So you have to get used to that, but I'll take that over not having the technology any day.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I'm old enough to remember practice when Federal Express started. And all of the litigators and were just like, damn, this means we're going to have to work on a brief until the absolute night before it's due, because there won't be an excuse. You can get it to the court the next day. And now, of course, everything gets filed at 11:59 on the deadline day. I would say, just on my own personal perspective, I've tried to keep up, and I think I do a reasonably good job of it. It is a challenge, though. Getting into a case, for example, with a significant e-discovery components, to me is a challenge.
Yeah.
That's something I didn't grow up with. And learning how to review a document database or to take the product of a review of that and review it further is something that, I have to be educated on. Look, there are ethical rules that require lawyers to keep up with technology. And, we as a firm, I'm sure you guys are very serious about that. And, it's because if you don't, I think, there's a loss of effectiveness as a practitioner. And there's a loss of credibility, I think, with people in the firm who are better at it. So.
Well, that's so true. We're still at the stage where the younger lawyers that are coming in that are good with technology are so valuable to the more senior lawyers that are handing out the work. And so, if I've got a team and I've got somebody who's got really good IT skills, boy, they are an important member of that team. All right.
Okay, back to our hypothetical.
All right, so Rory continues to work on her legal skills. How should Rory further develop her career track? Tax controversy is a complex field. Let's poll the audience. Does anyone know what this is? Tommy? Anybody? Anyone want to jump in? Go ahead, Leisha.
The whole tax controversy flow chart that the taxpayer advocate issues.
Yes, that's right. And Tom will remember when Nina Olson, when she was taxpayer advocate, this was her big production right before she finished her tenure as an amazing national taxpayer advocate. But I remember when she was talking about this, thinking, we're going to create a subway map. It's going to look like the New York subway map. And it does. This is controversy. This is what we do every day. So anytime you're thinking, oh, I just do controversy, it's just such a small area. Lots going on.
It's a very complex field, and it's a bit daunting because it's easy to make a mistake.
Yep.
One of the best pieces of advice I ever received from a senior lawyer was the second bullet point here about being nervous about your work product. And it's hard. You've worked on a memo, you've worked on a brief, you've worked on a presentation for a long time. You've proofread it 20 times. It's sitting on the credenza outside your office. Are you going to look at it again? Or it comes in the email. Are you going to look at it again? And the answer is yes. It's important to just not get tired of reviewing work product. Sometimes I sit in a room and read it out loud to myself because I catch things if I'm reading it out loud that I might miss if I'm reading it, particularly going back to technology. If you're multitasking, if you're reading a brief and you've got your email open and your email dings and somebody sends you an email and then you lose your focus a little bit. So I would say for our hypothetical Rory, being very nervous about work product is really important.
I think that's exactly right. And find someone who's not working the case with you and ask them to read it. I'll do that. We have an administrative professional in our office. She is smart as a whip. And oftentimes I'm just emailing her documents. She does not have a tax degree. She is not a tax practitioner. But she can read a document and tell me if it makes sense. She can find the errors. She can say, maybe you want to say this over here. And she's invaluable. And if she's not available, I'll give it to her. So she just give me a fresh set of eyes. On the LLM, so I'm a fan of LLMs. I really believe it's an opportunity to dig deep, to continue education. We learn every day. You never stop learning. If you stop learning, that means you've just stopped, right? Like that should be the end. Like, okay, I'm signing off. But an LLM, particularly if you're in this area, the professors are amazing. If I had the time, I would go do an LLM in tax again and just listen to these brilliant professors teach me various areas. I would take inbound and outbound, which I've never taken in terms of international tax. But so I'm a big fan of the LLMs.
So the specialization point is a balance, because if you get sort of too narrow, then what happens if the IRS priorities shift and all is conservation easements, for example? There's an oft-told sort of aphorism, I guess, about the difference between litigators and tax lawyers. And this is interesting because tax controversy kind of combines both. A litigator will get a case and learn everything there is to know about that case and the facts and the legal issues, and then they will finish that case and move on to the next case. And the next case could have very different facts and very different legal issues. And so the litigator goes through their career mastering a subject and then forgetting about it, and then mastering the next subject and then maybe partially forgetting about it, whereas a tax lawyer often becomes more and more specialized. Especially in the technical side, you get to be an expert in an area, and then you get even expert about a subcomponent of that area, and maybe a couple of regulations in that area, and then a couple of subsections in the regulations of that area. So people say that litigators end up at the end of their career having moved from case to case to case and forgotten the last one, knowing nothing about everything, and tax lawyers who get more and more and more and more specialized know everything about nothing. So somewhere in there is a balance that I think a developing younger lawyer needs to try to find.
Well, it's funny because I think people refer to tax controversy as a niche, right? We are niche practitioners. But you can look at that subway map. There is a lot to know in that subway map. And there's the civil side and the criminal side. There's the procedural side and litigation versus administrative. I mean, it's just, it can be quite broad. So, yeah.
So here's the curveball, Caroline.
Oh, yes. Chuck. No, he's stealing our people. No. So Rory is now in her 5th year at the firm, and she's doing well and getting good marks from other lawyers. Everyone is starting to take notice. She's taken on some expanded responsibilities. She's even running a couple of her cases. And a friend calls to tell Rory that jobs are opening at IRS Chief Counsel and suggests that Rory apply. What should Rory do? And we should give a shout out because the IRS is hiring. So there you go.
This is a deeply personal decision for anybody, and I
Yes.
don't think there are any hard and fast rules. We've tried to lay out some of the factors that I think people evaluate here, but it's an individual choice. I mean, you had a very hard set of decisions, I know, about whether to go into the government.
Thank you for listening. Right.
Obviously, you made the right call, but at the time, that was a daunting decision, right?
It's awful. It's awful.
I had multiple opportunities to move into government, which I never did. 3 out of the 4 times, somebody else made that decision. 1 out of the 4 times, I've sort of decided things weren't right. Mm-hmm. And for somebody who's becoming known and good in this area, this opportunity is going to come, and I think anybody who did it,
Yes.
you would tell anyone to
Yes.
do it
God
at this
bless you.
point, right?
Yes, yes. And as hard as it is to lose good people, and we've all been at firms where, I'm thinking of your associate, where someone is so talented and you want them to succeed and you help them build their platform, and the minute they get that kind of exposure, somebody calls and offers them a job, and you're like, oh, I actually heard of firms asking or taking the profiles off of their associates, taking their profiles off the online on the website. So now it's just name and without all the bio and, promotional stuff, because they were losing people so quickly, which is awful, right? But, okay. So yes, I would encourage people to consider government. If I had to do my career over, I've been blessed from start to finish. Even my mistakes, I have made some doozies. I have learned from them, and I'm a better person for it. But if I had to go back and do my whole life over again, I think I probably would have tried and worked at the government early on as like a line attorney, because I think that experience is invaluable, and then you have friendships going forward, and there's always time to go into private practice. My partners disagree. They want people to come to our firm now. But it's important. And I think partnership track will always be there if you are a good lawyer, and sometimes you come out of government and you become a partner when you come out, or certainly counsel on the way to partnership. No clear rules, very, very personal decision. No wrong answer here.
Right. I think
Yeah.
that's right.
Okay, Rory decides to stay at the firm. Oh, we're very lucky. Okay. And shortly afterwards, she's invited to present on a panel about some issues that she's briefed in a major case. Aha, Rory is now going to ramp up that marketing. So, of course, you should say yes, but now what?
So, this is an opportunity that, again, it's just one panel, and it's at perhaps at an APA meeting where there are going to be, dozens and dozens of panels and 35 substantive committees, so probably 115 or 120 programs getting put on over the meeting. But that should not be what Rory's thinking about. What she should be thinking about is this is her 20 minutes. This is her chance to really prepare, to volunteer to do the written material for the program, to prepare in advance, to road test her presentation, to meet and talk with the other participants on the panels, to figure out how the flow of conversation's going to go. It's a big opportunity for her. And, again, like I was talking about sort of informal meetings with senior lawyers, it's a little more outsized than just 20 minutes a shot in front of 30 or 35 people.
So true. Preparation for these panels is so important. Even if you only have 10 minutes, that 10 minutes can change your career, actually, depending on who's in the audience, who's listening. You might get invited to the next panel as a result of the performance on that panel, either up on the stage or in the work leading up to it. I, as a young lawyer, always volunteered to do the materials. In fact, Scott has been pulling it away from me, and I feel like you've been
20 years of guilt that
Right, no.
Caroline always did.
No. And we're very similar in that respect, like always trying to jump in and do the work. But as a result, I've learned a lot. And I think if you volunteer to do the materials, one, you got to do them, right? And you got to get them out to the people to review in time. So you don't want to volunteer and then not do it, because that's worse than not volunteering at all. But also, if you volunteer, you will be one of the most educated persons sitting on that panel, because you will have put together everything. It's so important. So yeah, I think that's important. The other thing I would say is say yes, right? We all have that moment where your stomach hurts, the invitation comes in and you pause and you say, oh, I don't know, could I fit it in?
I'm busy.
I'm not the right person, I'm not an expert in that area, everybody knows more than me. I promise you, when you're on that stage, you are the expert, all right? Everyone's there to hear from you. And don't worry if it's 500 people or 10 people. Just think of them as you're looking at the back of the room, but do it. Say yes, because that's what will change things. Even if you're an introvert, like I'm an extrovert that really likes to be left alone so I can power work on the weekends. even if you're an introvert, consider this because it's a fantastic opportunity.
And again, I'm going to mention the concept of leveraging. So if you're asked to do a panel, if Rory's asked to do a panel on something, there are other organizations that would like to hear about that same subject. Maybe there's an article to be written about that subject based on the work that was done in preparing the panel. Maybe the firm would like a client alert prepared to go around to the firm's email, marketing list of your thoughts on this particular issue. So it's not just a one-shot deal. Oftentimes there are ways you can leverage it into additional, marketing opportunities and other projects.
So true. Rory makes partner.
Yay!
Very exciting.
Congratulations.
Right, more work.
Right.
So Rory has become a full-fledged tax controversy lawyer and has garnered the respect of her colleagues both inside and outside the firm. What are some of the things Rory should incorporate into her practice development?
Well, number one is the most important. And if I've seen anything over the years, it's that when people make partner, they feel like they have, run through the tape, and they've got it. They're there. And now the brass ring or whatever you want to call it is there. That is exactly the wrong, the wrong approach. That is now you're an owner. Now this is your firm now, right? You're a shareholder or whatever the organizational structure is. The future of the firm is dependent on you and your colleagues who have just achieved this next step in their career to develop and continue to grow the firm. And so, I think that's the most important aspect of this. But everything else here now is almost like a luxury that somebody as a partner can really start to think more about some of these other subjects.
Yeah.
So can I take this opportunity
Sure.
to offer another question from the audience? And it actually fits well with the no slacking off. The question is, not necessarily part-time, but how do people make time in their lives for other commitments? In this
Other than work?
Other than work.
Oh.
Caroline can't answer that.
Whether it's forever
This is work.
or just a period of years, or how do you make time for other things?
All right, so I should say very quickly that I do have two children. I love them. They're fantastic. One is graduating from high school this year. One is graduating from college, Penn State, this year. I am married to a now retired law enforcement officer who has lots of hobbies and keeps himself very busy. So yes, I work around the clock, but there is a way to do that and to have a life with that.
I would say it's hard, but to me it depends on two things. One that may not be in your control and one that may be in your control. The one that may not be in your control is the type of colleagues and mentors you get to work with over the years. I was blessed that Mortimer Caplin, who founded our firm, created a culture where he almost demanded that lawyers in the firm maintain their family lives and their lives outside the practice of law. And the senior leadership of the firm adopted that into the firm's culture, and I would like to think it's still there. And so that's probably just a matter of luck. I do think it is acceptable, if not hugely important, for younger lawyers to try to set some kind of boundaries. And I think we're living in a time now where there is greater respect, given what we've been through the last couple of years, to people who have to juggle a lot of different responsibilities. And I would say don't be afraid to try to set a boundary. If an email comes across the transom at 5 o'clock on a Friday or 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and my wife and I raised 3 sons, so we had stuff going on all the time. I think it's permissible now to write back and say, I've got a couple of things this weekend. Is it okay if I get back to you by X? I think setting expectations and drawing boundaries, within a kind of acceptable realm is something that more senior people will appreciate and will recognize. If not, then those aren't necessarily the kind of people you want to be working for if you can avoid it. But I do think that it's possible to be, somewhat forward-leaning on that these days.
I think that's so true. One of the hurdles that I have because of my reputation is that people that work with me think that I want them to work 24/7. And actually, I like it when people take breaks because then I can catch up on stuff. And when they're back, then it's ready for them. So no matter how hard the people and nutty the people that you're working with at the firm could be, don't presume that because they work that way that they expect you to work that way. Have a conversation with them. I love it when people say, I'm taking a couple days off, or I'm going to the graduation, or we're going away for the weekend. As long as they're like, let me kind of know what to expect, that's all good, right? Because I don't want them quitting. I don't want them burning out. I need everybody running at top speed when they're running, but when they are off, they need to be off. They need to recharge. Doesn't mean that I need to do it. Don't make me do it. But I need you guys to do it. So when you're here and you're 100%. So don't hesitate to have those conversations.
A couple of other things on this slide about sort of life, in the world of once you make sort of partner. One is teaching. We were talking about this a little bit before. I think, both Caroline and I teach. And we would, I think, both tell you that if you get the opportunity, and indeed you should try to make the opportunity to try to teach, that it's an invaluable experience to go through. I think it's made me a better lawyer. It certainly made me a better communicator with clients in trying to explain, their situation to them. Your teaching has gone across a much wider swath of specialization than I have, but I think you'd probably say the same.
All in controversy, though.
Yeah.
I try and stay in my little. That's true. I mean, I really enjoy teaching. I always wish I had more time to prepare for class. Every class, I walk out of class saying, I can do that better. I can follow up. I can prepare more. I can hit this. I walk out with questions and then I try and answer them. It just makes you better because you realize that the next generation is relying on you for teaching, that subject area. So, agreed.
Couple of things here too. Involvement in firm management. Both Caroline and I do that.
Mm-hmm.
I did it. I was managing partner for 8 years. I loved 90% of that, and the other 10% I really hated. But I just think that's part of the job. But if you wanna have an imprint on your firm, and that's one way to do it. And so, given the opportunity to get involved in recruiting or get involved in marketing, get involved in administrative aspects of the firm and sort of progress your way up into firm management, it takes time and it's an added burden, but it can be immensely rewarding to help sort of shape the organization in a direction that, you think is important. I know you run your office. I mean, you started that and built it, and now that's got to take some time.
Yeah, it does. It takes some time, but it's a team effort, and that's what's important to remember is that if whatever organization you're in, whether it's IRS, DOJ, Treasury, a law firm, a law school, a clinic, you have a team. All right. Even if you're a solo, you have a team because you have a network outside of your firm, and you need to tap into those resources to help you out. Two things I just want to stress quickly: pro bono work. We have to give back. All right. We are in a very busy practice area. We are extremely fortunate to have great cases and great work. There's a lot of taxpayers. 150 million plus returns are filed every year. A lot of taxpayers cannot afford counsel. Give back. Let's improve the tax system and let's diversify the tax bar. Okay. We've come quite a ways from where we were 30, 40 years ago, but we have miles left to go. Okay. And so it's incumbent on everyone, regardless of your background, to bring in and diversify the tax bar. We're all better for it. Let's just keep that in mind, and every opportunity that you can do that. So I know we have 2 minutes left.
Yeah, just one other thing here, the second to last bullet point. I mean, if Rory becomes partner in this firm and develops her career in the way we've talked about, she's going to be somebody that other firms are interested in.
Yep.
And, everybody, when you get to be more senior, headhunters call. And again, that's a personal decision for people. I've stayed at the same place for 40 years. I've seen people leave who had a bad month. And they just got a call at a time when they were down, and maybe they'd gotten some adverse results. Maybe they'd had a couple of run-ins with some other people in the firm they were not happy about, and they had a bad month and they decided to leave. And I've sort of thought, I'm not sure that's the decision tree. if a phone call comes in from a headhunter, it's not, have you had a bad month or did you have a bad couple of weeks? But, the burden of proof should be on somebody trying to convince you to change jobs if you're happy.
Yeah.
Now, if you're not happy, that's different. But it's inevitable that those calls are going to come.
Agreed. And it might come from the government. It
Yes.
may be those opportunities, like my senior government experience came when I was a relatively senior lawyer, and it was hard to make that decision. But, give it a lot of thought. And then once you make the decision, make sure that you do it right, that you talk to your current employers, you talk to your colleagues, you stay in touch, you maintain those good relationships, that you work so hard to make sure every case is perfect before you leave in terms of passing it on to the next person. Remember, footsteps. You leave imprints where you go, and it's important.
And this last slide is the pay it forward
Yeah.
slide. It's somebody who reaches a level of seniority, benefited from good mentoring, benefited from people who had a good sense of life and work balance. There's an alarm.
I know, boy.
Benefited from good delegation. That's the time to pay it forward. And knowing Rory, she will do that as she progresses down the road in her career.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to both of you for that wonderful hour. I thought that was great.
Good, thank you.
So did we. It was
It was fun. That
Thank
was
you for listening.
A different type of panel to do.
Oh,
It was
that
a lot of fun.
Great.
It was great. So we're going to take a 15-minute networking break. Of course, get some refreshments outside, and then we'll come back for the next panel at 2:15. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks. All right. Speakers, where would you like our speaker releases? Front desk?